Hi, Jeanette.
Hi.
I thought I'd log in a few minutes early because I've had a few IT issues today.
Okay, just to let you know, we've started live streaming just to make sure that we can do it as well.
Oh, okay, excellent. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Just to let you know that we're live streaming already.
Okay.
Good afternoon for everyone that's joined already. Just to let you know that we're presently live streaming. Just got to wait for some more people to join. and for Rashik.
Hello.
Afternoon, Rashik.
How are you doing?
All right, thank you. Just to let you know that we are live streaming. We've started.
Okay, cool. How's everybody doing? Are we all keeping well? Keeping safe? Keep COVID free, that's important. Should we, are we waiting for any more?
Yes, we are. Everyone seems to be slow in joining today.
Okay. We'll give everybody, give it another minute or so, and then we can get going, I think.
So looking along the list at this moment in time, we've only got one public sector person,
Right.
which would be Councillor Byford. So until we won't be quorate until we have another.
Okay.
Shall I go and make life even easier?
No, no, don't do that. We need you. Love the background there. That's some really nice pictures.
That's Wakefield.
I know.
As somebody said at a meeting recently, all roads lead to Wakefield.
Jeanette, we're expecting Councillor Hinchcliffe to join us, well, aren't we?
Yes, we are expecting. She hadn't said that she wouldn't be. And also Councillor Khan as well accepted. So we are expecting them. It's just maybe a little bit delayed.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, what we'd have to do, we could start, but we just wouldn't be quorate until we start. And I'd only be able to publish the minutes. There'd be notes that I did.
Sure. Let's just go. I think we're 5 minutes in, so I don't want to wait much longer now.
We've received, shall I say who we've received apologies from?
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Okay, so we've received apologies from Martin Booth, from Glenn Robinson, Simon Barrett, and Claire Paxman just let me know that she's not very well, so she was holding off until the last minute.
Okay.
And then Liz Needleman's going to be a little late in joining.
Okay. So in the case where we're not quorate, what do we do?
Well, we can continue with the meeting. It's just there would be as notes and not minutes.
Okay, that's fine. So any disclosable interests? Anything changed that people need to declare? No. I don't think there's anything that's exempt in this meeting, so we can have it all public. Right.
That's correct.
Yeah. From the notes from the minutes from the last meeting, is there any questions or comments or corrections we need to those? Or everybody comfortable with those minutes? We're all good. Okay, so there was a few actions. I just want to give you an update on the actions. The first one was the roundtable around green skills. One of the actions was to have a green skills discussion. We had a very good green skills partnership meeting. There was a strong attendance from a number of sectors. I was at the meetings, chairing the meeting. What really hit me was everybody's passion in wanting to make a difference here, and recognizing that this was a huge opportunity for us in building new skills and bringing a new opportunity to the region. So we've agreed on building that structure and moving that forward. From the panel's perspective, I wanted to test your views on should we appoint somebody to be the champion or represent the panel in that Green Skills partnership. Claire Paxman was attending for us. I know Claire's not on the call today, but she would be a natural person to join that, both in terms of skill set and interest. So are we comfortable with Claire doing that? Any concerns, or anybody else suggest we should have somebody else there?
I propose that course of action.
Thanks, Councillor Byford. Okay, if everybody's agreed, you can do the little thumbs up. If you go to little reactions, you can do a thumbs up on the screen like that. You see, then yes, perfect. So we've got some thumbs up. Very good. Now we're getting good Zoom behavior now. This is good. Okay, so the second thing is there's a task force being set up on green skills. Obviously, the task force is still launching. It's going to be chaired by Business and Energy Minister and Gillian Keenan from an apprenticeship and skills perspective. So I think that's a tremendous opportunity. The task force is looking at the creation of 2 million skilled jobs. It's building back the capability to help us achieve the net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And that task force is something that obviously we're going to stay close to and be part of. It will set the direction for new jobs and new capabilities for us, so that the Green Skills Partnership will help us in contributing to that. The second action, I think, was in the last meeting, there was Peter O'Brien and Peter Glover were going to be discussing the equality data in our labour market stats. So there'll be an invite from Peter to give a debrief on that separately. So that should be coming through.
Okay, thanks, Rashik. I'm happy to start if Peter, the other Peter, wants to make any comments on this. That's great. We met with Peter and some of our universities, and we've agreed that we'll bring together more of our universities in West Yorkshire to discuss how best we can bring some of their real-time data to help reflect, in effect, the labour market intelligence and statistics that Peter and his team produce, and in particular what the universities can do more to support that overall kind of research and skills analytical capacity, which we know exists in the combined authority, but I think there's a real appetite amongst the universities to do a little bit more there. So we've agreed to convene a further meeting, Rashik, and we'll come back with some proposals from that, if that's okay.
Excellent. And I don't know if anybody from the panel wants to join or support that, because I think it's an important initiative here as well. Peter Glover, anything else you want to add?
Sorry, just unmuting there. Yeah, so what we'll probably also do is put a paper to the next meeting of the panel, just setting out the kind of wider proposals around that, because there are a range of things that we need to update the panel on, and they should come to fruition by that next meeting.
Yeah, I think it's an important topic, and we should just stay close to that. So that quality data is going to be helping us become the kind of region where people want to be because of the data and how we perceive from that data. We need to just keep that going. Okay, obviously today's spending review. So I know there's lots of eyes with multiple screens, I'm sure, looking at the commentary on what Rishi Sunak's saying. So one of the things that we're anticipating was around funding and some of the pilots and the source of funding. I don't know whether Catherine or Sonia, you've seen any of the commentary around that, and is there any comments you want to make around that today whilst we're here?
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of watching the entire thing. I think a lot of the things in terms of skills and employment, the main announcement I think was the 4.3 billion for the restart scheme, which will be there to support those that have been unemployed for more than a year for the next 3 years, to support them with job search and to increase capacity in job centres as well.
Good. And obviously we're trying to get our fair share of that. Okay. Anything else we want to cover from that, Sonia? Or should we go on to the next topic around the board update?
Yeah, I mean, there was quite a few other announcements which we're just working through, and perhaps I can offer to send a briefing note after this meeting if panel members would find that useful.
I think that'd be useful. I would certainly find it useful. Great. Happy
to do that.
On the last LEP board, there was a discussion on unconscious bias training, and there's an opportunity for panel members to attend that. So if anybody wants to join that along with myself, then more than happy to do that. Just let us know separately. That was an offer from the Leeds Community Foundation Chief Exec. It's been very well received, and I think that's as part of our inclusion strategy and policy in the board. We should be following that. There's a topic that we wanted to look through in terms of digital, when we so I think there was plans for us in the government to create these technical colleges. I forget the time, the Institutes for Technology, and I know we had a proposal in the previous round. Obviously, there's going to be a second round of funding. I can understand some of the sensitivity around bidding again. So I know some of the colleges in the region were trying to decide whether they should bid or not and how we should bid. But for me, that's a big topic. I think we want to make sure that we've got the ability to build those technical skills going forward. And just want to make sure that panel members are aware that we're going to just explore how we can best capture our fair share of that government spending. So again, Sonia, I don't know if you want to add anything to what I just said there.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I was going to cover it under item 8 of the agenda, alongside some other policy. Okay, well let's do it then. Okay, we can do it then. That's fine. Okay, thank you. Right. Okay. So those are the main things that I had on my list of things to talk about. Should we move on to the employment skills programs? Catherine, do you want to take us through an update here?
Yeah. Afternoon, everybody. Yeah. So you've got the paper, and I just want to add some additional information. So at 2.1, we've provided an update on the Employment Hub, which is the ESF funded programme, but also how we repurposed the programme when the COVID hit. We are now looking at seeking additional support and resource, because that original programme is now fully supported and fully committed, hand-holding those that are furthest from the labour market, who are struggling to move out of or into alternative options at the moment. But we know that unemployment will be increasing. We know that obviously we've got the furlough extension now until March, and we have got people who are considering their next career moves because their current jobs or sectors are probably vulnerable in the current climate and in the changes to priority sectors moving forward. So on Friday, there will be a paper going to the combined authority seeking additional resources to support that repurposed and enhanced hub, working with our delivery partners in the local authorities. Obviously, on the back of the announcements today that's already been mentioned, so the Kickstart programme for young people has been extended. Sonia's already mentioned the enhanced restart programme for 25 plus who are longer term employed, but also in that is looking at the detail, because we know that there are more work coaches more support mechanisms being added. So we are working with Job Centre Plus to make sure that whatever additional resources we put in place are complementary, and that it's probably those that are more at risk rather than on unemployment or on universal credit that will be supported by Job Centre that we'll be looking at enhancing moving forward. Also in the paper that's going on Friday with Combined Authority is a proposal that will complement this service, where we are looking at developing non-accredited training courses that will be bootstrap style, that will move people quickly towards their new sectors and give them an outline and underlying skills to be able to put on their application forms and an understanding of the sort of jobs moving forward. So hopefully we get approval for that at the on Friday, and we'll be able to update more at the February panel. At 2.2, I've reported about the levy transfer service that we introduced last November. I'm pleased to say that in the next few weeks, we will be able to announce some major commitments and pledges to the levy transfer programme, which again, in the Chancellor's announcement, I see that the enhancement and incentives for apprenticeship programme has been extended beyond January next year. So once we have come out of lockdown, furlough, etc., hopefully employers will start reopening, feeling more comfortable to offer opportunities such as work experience, apprenticeship placements, etc. And so with the additional incentive and levy transfer, which will pay for 100% of the apprenticeship training, that will hopefully be a really good incentive to boost our apprenticeship agenda again moving forward. In the report, we've updated on the work that our schools team are doing. I think it's really useful to see that schools are now settling into a delivery programme of their main curriculum, and they are actually engaging with our careers advisors and enterprise coordinators, and are really appreciating the online tools that we have put in place for them around career choices, what different sectors do. There's teaching materials on there. And we're also creating virtual work experience opportunities. And schools are feeding back that this is just a really good alternative way of teaching, but giving a break from the normal curriculum delivery. So that's really good to see that incentive there. At 2.9, we've reported that we did put in the bid for a digital boot camp, and we are hoping that we will have some announcements in the not foreseeable future on that, about who has been successful and what will be delivered through that. We know that it was for a Leeds City region bid, so we look forward to those announcements. And also, again, in the Chancellor's statement, he has announced further boot camps being launched from spring next year. I think in the statement made recently by the Prime Minister, in the summer announcements, it was very much about targeted sectors. So I think the next one will possibly be around construction, but we'll wait and see. And then just a quick update on Skills for Growth, which is our newest programme to be delivered. So the programme formally started in September. We've got a team of 8 business partnership advisors who are out on the patch virtually at the moment, working with educational intermediaries and starting to get their faces known with business networks and stakeholders. It's a European funded programme, and so we have a project inception visit in December. So following that and all approvals and systems go from DWP, we'll be able to do a full report back to the February panel. I think that those are the updates on the employment and skills programmes. If anybody's got any questions.
Great. It's great to see the sort of spectrum of stuff that we're doing there. So that's excellent work. Thanks, Tim. Questions or comments for Catherine? Yep, Brian, go ahead.
I think that's a really good summary, Catherine. I think obviously the critical thing at the moment is the unemployment numbers. Obviously, you'll have seen that some of the Chancellor's statement, 2.6 million unemployed by Q2. in 2021, and in our region, just last month, the claimant count was up 87%. Of course, that's disproportionately affected young people aged 16 to 24. And I know nationally, the number of young people in employment had also fallen significantly by 174,000. So, it's quite urgent and important that we put some kind of rapid response together that built on some of the existing programmes. And as Catherine articulated, there is a proposal going to the Combined Authority Board on Friday to scale up the Employment Hub and Reboot to support those young people and others that are obviously will be coming off furloughs as we move forward. So just wanted to add my support.
No, thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. David, yeah, fine.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Catherine. I just wanted to say from a school's perspective, the resources that have been put together and provided are very, very welcome. But I also think it's worth pointing out that schools are on an exponential learning curve in terms of what works. We've learned a lot in the last 6 months. So I think the important thing is to keep that strategy really responsive and be guided by what is emerging as best practice. And I also think there's a couple of important issues to raise. The first thing is, I think in light of the comment that Brian's just made as well, the young people that I work with are feeling particularly disenfranchised at the moment. And I think any opportunities to build in a genuine way their voice is really important. And the other thing is there's a lot more learning in terms of what's going on in families and communities to take place. So we've provided laptops and things for all our disadvantaged students, and as many as the extra as we can, but that masks actually familiar relationships and the access and how that might be shared within the family. And, in my experience, there's a gender issue around that as well sometimes. And so I think that the depth of understanding that we can develop in the next few months, and hopefully when we come through all this, we'll be in a very strong place in terms of delivering much more blended learning. And I think that the contribution that's been made is really important and really well received.
No, that's great, and I appreciate the commentary. I think we are in a rapidly learning environment for all of us, so it's we've got to stay responsive as the situation changes. Catherine, anything else you want to add? Yes.
I think later on in the agenda, Mark Temple is going to update us on the digital skills partnership. So unless Mark wants to come in and comment now, I think he will have some comments around KIT and how we're developing that digital learning agenda as well. Yeah,
let's come to that on the agenda. I think that's an important topic. We should give him the proper time there. Brian,
sorry, I just wanted to make a really brief point while we were on the subject of young people. Catherine also touched on sectors, and of course the accommodation and food sector has been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. Again, in our region, we've got over 2,500 businesses that are at risk of insolvency, and a large proportion of the workforce will obviously need to be reskilled and redeployed. And again, that's something we need to think about in terms of targeting and targeted support, particularly for that sector, which traditionally employs younger people in that 16 to 24 sort of age group category. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, if I could, Rashid.
Sure.
It's great that the Reboot and the Employment Hub proposals are going ahead for approval. It just struck me a bit strange. I'd have thought that would have come to this panel as well for an eyesight. It's the sort of thing we ought to be supporting as a group. And just one general point that is mentioned somewhat in the paper, that apprenticeships take-ups are down, and as a panel we should be aware that there's quite a severe shortage in apprenticeship starts, but particularly for young people. So in my own institution it's about 20% down. I suspect that's mirrored across the area, and I think for the panel it would be good to get a fairly up-to-date update on current starts.
Catherine, can we pick that up for, and obviously make a note that I think it's important we do bring these kind of topics into the panel.
Yeah.
Can I come in on that point, please?
Sure.
Yeah. So the proposals around Reboot and the Employment Hub are part of the economic recovery plan, which has been considered by the Economic Recovery Board. So, you know, with the pace we're working at things, we're not able to bring individual proposals as opportunities become available, but they're all in the Economic Recovery Plan, which has been discussed with all panels, and we've taken input on that.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and I think we did bring that to the last panel meeting as well. So as part of that pack there as well.
I'll just jump in quickly as well. With regard to the apprenticeship impact, I have developed a position paper about the impacts on the FE sector in general, but with particular focus on apprenticeships. And that has been shared with Catherine and all the local MPs. And it was a survey and roundtable exercise I did with about 50% of our network members. So about 40 training providers and colleges took part in the survey. So I can share that with the group because that's probably the most up-to-date data that you've got from the horse's mouth in terms of the impacts and what's happening with recruitment and kind of recovery as well.
That's great. Catherine,
yeah, do you want me to circulate that, Alex? Because I've got that, so I can get that out fairly quickly.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks.
Sorry, can I just come in briefly on the apprenticeship question?
Sure.
Or comment on it. Young people in apprenticeships, so just separating out the impacts of COVID, young people in apprenticeships was declining steadily for 2 or 3 years before the COVID crisis hit. It then declined more quickly. So the current position, what we've seen this year is a significant increase nationally in the number of 16 to 18-year-olds full-time in colleges, partly driven by the fact that very few are now gaining apprenticeships. But if we're talking about that issue, it's not an issue just related to COVID. It was something that was already happening before COVID.
Yeah. And I think on the chat, Peter's also made the comment that the apprenticeship stats for 2019-2020 academic year is going to be published tomorrow. So we'll see that data as well. I just also wanted to note, welcome to Councillor Mulligan. Thanks for joining. That makes us quorum. So I think we can have this as a formal meeting now. Okay, let's move on. Thanks for that, Catherine. If we move on to the employment skills policy updates, Sonia, do you want to take us through that?
Yes, I'm happy to. Just to point out, Chair, there may have been a mixed order in the papers that went out. So the items may have been mixed up. So on the agenda, the next item is the devolution agenda, but I'm happy to do the policy update.
No, let's do, it's my fault. I wasn't reading probably. Yeah, we should do the devolution update first. Mark, do you want to cover that?
Certainly can. Just coming off mute. Apologies. Right, Catherine, I'm not sure if we've got Craig on the call to talk about adult education budget as well, or whether you'll cover that.
I'm doing the AB update.
Yeah, Catherine will cover that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, just from a local digital skills partnership perspective, I think I joined very briefly a couple of months ago, where we were literally just looking to launch the local digital skills partnership. So I won't read through the whole report in detail, but to say that we had a very successful launch on the 15th of October, supported by Councillor Hinchcliffe, amongst many others. So nearly 100 people were in attendance, including Carolyn Dinage, the Minister for Digital and Culture, which was fabulous. And we've moved at quite a pace since then in terms of starting to form a local digital skills partnership board. Several people on the call today are members of that board, which is pleasing to see. But we've had great success in pulling together a real broad church of partners on that board, ranging from local West Yorkshire businesses, Yorkshire universities with Peter, the consortium of colleges, STEM Learning, BCS, who run the digital curriculum, Be the Business. I've joined from a national perspective, along with some of our local chambers and the digital enterprise, and from a third sector perspective, Good Things Foundation. So a real broad church to cover the breadth of the digital skills challenge, which ranges from SME digital inclusivity through to social digital inclusivity, and then building the workforce for the future. First board meeting took place on Monday, which was very much a scene-setting meeting and getting people to understand the context and how digital skills helps to support the wider West Yorkshire Combined Authority agenda around COVID recovery, employment and skills, inclusive growth, etc., etc. So that's moved at a real pace. I think what has been really exciting to see since the launch event is the number of potential partners who've reached out to discuss opportunities, to link up. Several different national programs which are free to air and available for all to use, such as the Amazon Small Business Accelerator, amongst many others. So working with obviously partners to bring those to light and support the region. The real piece here is about the partnerships, and I think everybody on the call would agree that across the piece we can't tick the box on any of those items without building a real good network of partnerships. So one ask of everybody on the call today is if you're aware of skills providers who would have a real interest in supporting across the West Yorkshire region, please direct them to me. I'd love to talk to them more about the opportunities to engage with the Digital Skills Partnership, particularly when we start to look at those key priorities for the region and how, more importantly, how we actually deliver some real meaningful impact to support those disadvantaged within the region. So that's one ask. The secondary ask is really to keep the profile up of the Digital Skills Partnership. I know this is a key agenda for this panel, and it has a significant impact across the region, both in terms of economic performance, but also the social performance and how we can support and reach those furthest away from the workplace. So please, where you have the opportunities to promote it, do so. And I guess two final points before I pass back on to Catherine is just in terms of the provision of kits that Catherine alluded to earlier. This isn't necessarily under the remit of the Digital Skills Partnership, but it's absolutely something that is fundamental to success. If you think about the well-used model of accessibility, connectivity, skills and motivation, if any one of those four elements falls, we fail to succeed across our key targets. So the accessibility is a critical piece, and I'm already having several conversations with the likes of Lloyds Bank, who are really keen to support provision of kit, and then linking in with 100% digital leads around that, but also Digital Access West Yorkshire and an organisation called Hubbub. Hubbub will be launching a programme in Leeds, and after a discussion with them yesterday, hopefully the wider West Yorkshire region, around providing mobile phones or smartphones to disadvantaged families. They've got a target of over 2,000 for the region. They have a launch date of the 1st of March for that. So we'll look to get more details and bring that back to the board in due course. That comes with a contract, a free contract for 12 months, which is, sorry for Liz, who's just joined, but that comes with via O2 with 6 gigs of data and free phone calls and texts. So that will really help to support some disadvantaged families there. And the final piece really is just to say, from the board meeting and the sharing of the context of how important digital skills is, the board members have been sent home with some homework to reflect on a brain dump of priorities and themes, and to reflect on that, and so we can really start a constructive conversation at the next meeting in January to build out those priorities and what the delivery mechanisms will be. So I look forward to coming back to the board in February with an update and a more detailed list of the next steps.
Great, thanks, Mark. Any questions or comments from Mark there? You covered a lot there for us already. No, Catherine, do you want to talk about the AB?
Yeah, so just an update really. So at previous meetings throughout this year, we've involved you in the consultation and the planning and preparation up to getting the AB strategy approved, which went to the Combined Authority on the 4th of September. I think we reported at the last meeting that we had our provider briefing on the 17th of September, for which there's a film on our dedicated AB webpage now. The first stage of our procurement, our dynamic purchasing system process, started in October. And that basically, the first stage is for providers to register interest and upload initial applications to be approved onto our supplier list. And that closes this Friday. So obviously we're now in procurement stage, so there's only so much detail that we can disclose at the moment, to be fair to everybody. We are looking now at getting ready for the second stage of procurement, where we are working with colleagues in our local authorities who have the strategic lead on skills and employment to identify the skills gaps and what we need to procure in the new year. The governance arrangements that I think we consulted with as part of the early consultation process for the strategy will be going to the Combined Authority on Friday for approval, and that the governance arrangements includes the involvement of the Employment and Skills Panel as an advisory group. So we will bring back regular commentary and discussion on the AEB activity as we move forward post-commissioning next year. And I think that's it. So we're busy up to now. We're going to be doing the shortlisting, and then after Christmas we will go into full procurement process throughout the spring period. As the report says, then we should find out our formal allocation from DFE in March time, and we will be all up and running, procured, contracted, ready for delivery from August next year.
There's a lot of work to do between now and then, but it's an important topic. So we do want to make sure we maximise the value we get from the programme. Mm-hmm. Any other comments? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Colin, go ahead.
Can I just clarify what proportion or how much of the budget we're seeking to go out to competitive tender and procurement for, and how much is going to be dealt with through negotiations and funding allocations?
So that detail's being worked through, and that will be announced when we come to the procurement in the new year.
So we don't know yet.
We're in the middle of a procurement situation, so that's not for us to discuss in public, really.
Okay, I mean, what lies at the heart of that question is planning of the main chunk of the adult education budget, which goes via colleges and via funding.
So the grant providers, so we will be coming out to grant providers starting before Christmas to start discussing allocations and anticipated allocations. But obviously we won't get the confirmation of the full budget anyway till March. So they will be indicative, but we will come to grant providers in advance of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Brian, go ahead.
I think that's a really good challenge, Colin, and I think obviously the indicative allocation is 63 million. We haven't got the final allocations yet, but what is important, I think, just in terms of the messaging, is that obviously we want a stable and strong supply side with a lower risk transition to the new arrangements, and that, you know, by its nature means that we'd look to, in terms of the percentage split, have a larger percentage of grant allocation versus the element that's going out to competitive tender. Obviously, detail to follow as part of the procurement process, but hopefully that will give you some assurance that we want to minimise the risk of that transition and at the same time make sure that we're delivering the needs of the region. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, any other questions or comments from everybody? No, okay, thanks, Catherine. I think we can now move forward to Sonia to talk about the employment and skills policy updates.
Thank you, Rashik. There are a lot of policy developments that are covered in the paper, which I don't intend to go through in detail here. There are 4 main ones, I think, that I would just like to update on and seek the panel's comments and questions. And they are, I'll go through them all, but they are for reference if people want to ask questions at the end. The current timescales for the employment and skills plan refresh, the local skills plan, which is a requirement of being a skills advisory panel, the National Skills Fund and the Lifetime Skills Guarantee, which was picked up as part of the earlier spending review statement by Rishi Sunak, and then, as Rashik has already mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, Institutes of Technology. So if I start with the employment and skills plan, because of the ongoing economic emergency as it's been described this afternoon by Rishi, and due to a lot of recent national policy changes, many of which you are living through, and because also we're anticipating before the end of this year a white paper on FE reform, we're seeking approval to put a pause on the current timescales of the employment skills plan, even, if I can get my words out. So we were looking to publish in early next year, but because of all those changes and needing to, some of which have not been published, and needing to digest some of those, we're proposing that we revise the timescale so that a draft plan is brought back to the panel in February, before it goes to the LET board and the CA board for endorsement, probably in June, July time. A benefit of doing this is because the Business Innovation and Growth panel at the same time are developing their business productivity and resilience plan, as well as an innovation framework. So actually it's because those 3 strategies need to talk to each other, it's quite fortuitous in a way that we can develop those side by side. And I'd like to propose that a joint workshop, it would be useful to have a joint workshop with members of this panel and members of the Business Innovation panel as well in January, ahead of finalising the employment and skills plan that will then come to this panel in February for approval. Moving on to the...
Oh, just before I go past that, so Sonia,
yeah.
just check if anybody's got any comments. Are we all okay with that going forward? I mean, from my perspective, it makes a lot of sense, but I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with that. We got some nods there. We're good, Sonia. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Also coming to the February panel will be the local skills plan. The local skills plan is a requirement. SAPs are required to publish a local skills plan, and the Department for Education have set out a standardised approach for each SAP to do this. And that's because local skills plans will report to a national skills and productivity board, which in turn reports directly to ministers. And the national board will have a remit for developing national skills priorities and therefore influencing future policy design. So it's just to note that that plan will also come to the February meeting of this panel. And just, I think it's probably noteworthy at this stage just to mention that as part of our Minded to Devolution deal, we are, as officers, more engaged with department government officials. So we regularly have meetings with our colleagues in other mayoral combined authorities and the Greater London Authority with DFE, where we get to discuss emerging skills policy. And I think that's been really useful. And yeah, it's been good to be at the table at that. Which brings me on to the next two items, which is National Skills Fund, which replaces what was the National Retraining Fund, and was announced by the Prime Minister as a lifetime skills guarantee to enable lifelong learning. So it is intended, the money will be used to fund a level 3 qualification, a first level 3 qualification for adults, and provide some loan flexibility so that adults can undertake retraining at any point in their career and use loans for technical as well as higher education. Both of these things, incidentally, were raised as part of the Skills Commission's blueprint on the post-16 system, so it's reassuring to see that these have been enacted. It's noteworthy for this panel because level 3 provision, of course, is also provided through the devolved adult education budget. And indeed, across the country, 50% of that adult education budget is devolved to mayoral combined authorities. The DFE have made clear that National Skills Fund, although there's an element of overlap in terms of how qualifications can be funded, will not be devolved. But perhaps there's an opportunity for us in West Yorkshire to think about how we can enhance local provision as we're at the start of our AUB devolution journey. The DFE has been delaying publishing a list of qualifications that will be available and funded at level 3. And there are some concerns about what gaps there may be in those qualifications, including by sector, because the qualifications that will be funded are deemed to be economically viable. But also, back to Dave Cooper's point, in being economically viable, there are some concerns that there may be a gender bias there. So the qualifications that may be on that list might be dominated by males that take up those areas of learning. I'll just pause there for any questions or comments.
Yeah, no, good. There's a lot you went through there. So. Any questions or comments there?
Rashik, sorry, could I come in, Rashik?
Sure.
Peter. Yeah, I think it's really, thanks for the report, Sonia, really helpful. Last week, our Vice Chancellors met with the local authority chief executive group in the region, and really good meeting. But Gillian Hillier, who's the new government's head of place in Yorkshire and the Humber, and is from DFE. So each government now has allocated a head of place, a civil servant from the department, and Yorkshire's is Gillian from DFE. I think it might be good for the panel at some stage, if the combined authority hasn't done this, to engage with Gillian. I think in terms of thinking how she might be able to engage with what the work is that Sonia's outlined here. And I know she's very keen to meet different people and partners in the region as soon as possible.
Good, thanks for that. How do you want to do that? Do you want people to come back to you? Do you want to, what's the best way of organising this?
Well, I mean, I think either Brian or I think the senior officers of the Combined Authority might have Gillian's details, but if not, I've got a meeting lined up with some of our VCs, but I'm happy to share that if Brian doesn't have it and he thinks that's a good thing for the Combined Authority to speak to Gillian about.
Brian's nodding and thumbs up, so yes. Okay, good. Okay. Sonia, anything else, or Sonia, do you want to keep going?
There was just the fourth thing I was just going to bring to the panel's attention around institutes of technology, which I know Rashik mentioned at the head of the meeting. Yeah. And just to say that this appears to be a key government policy, particularly to address the gap in higher level technical education in STEM subjects. The funding that's available is 120 million for this second wave for 8 institutions, which is around 15 million per institution if you divide it in that way, and it is only for capital funding. Just to make the panel aware that our region would be eligible for a new Institute of Technology, because we don't currently have one, although the deadline to submit the first stage application is like 2 weeks away, the 14th of December. And there have been conversations outside of this meeting, and we understand that the current funding model for institutes of technology, the timescales that have been set out for this second wave, and indeed the timing that this information has come out, means that we're not expecting a submission from our region to be put forward. And whilst it's unlikely, well, it's highly unlikely that so bids have to be led by a college, and it's highly unlikely that a college from out of area would apply to deliver in our region. It is possible, and it is possible, and it could be that we wouldn't know if that happened, because LEPs do not have a formal role in the evaluation at this stage in terms of applications for IoTs, although I understand LEP chairs have written to government to point out that SAPs should really have a role in that. And of course, it might be that the FE reform white paper offers an opportunity for the sector to respond to the need for level 4 and level 5 technical qualifications in a model that's more appropriate for our region. That was the update, but I'm sure that colleagues will want to
yeah, so what's people's views of that? I mean, from my perspective, I know the technical skills is an important part of the program, and I understand the complexity around the timing and the way the funding's been allocated, which makes it difficult for us. But I'd love to see that kind of institute in the region, because I think it would be good for us, right?
Can I offer a response, Rashik?
Sure.
I'm chair of West Yorkshire Consortium of Colleges, and we've thought long and hard about institutes of technology. In the first round, we did put a bid in, which was going to be for a centralised bid to support health technologies. I think in the intervening period, and seeing how some of the other institutes have panned out, I think collectively, and Colin will add his word, I'm sure, after me, was that really the concept of having one institute for a region as diverse and large as West Yorkshire felt almost perverse. What we really want is centres in each of the major conurbations that support technical skills at level 4 and 5, and we want it across the piece as well. The current concept is that you focus in on one particular form of skills, and the idea of setting up just a health centre felt a bit perverse, because you'd also want to set up an advanced manufacturing centre. From the announcement today, there's another 1.5 billion announced for FE investment. I think collectively as colleges, what we want to see is 5 centres in all the major conurbations with a complementary set of foci, so that we can support industry across the board. I don't know if you've got anything else to add there, Colin.
Sorry, no, that was a good summary now. I would also say I spent a long time talking to the DFE officials in the run-up to this round of Institute of Technology applications, and the DFE are still really unclear about what they are and what their purpose is. I know it seems a bit strange, but that's nevertheless true. The structures of the first round are quite varied. They're varied again for wave 2. There's 8 due to be approved this round, but there's 20 areas without an IoT. So the plan is for there to be a wave 3. And just following up on what's been said so far, I would agree with everything that's been said. I think that there's some advantages in waiting for wave 3 and seeing whether things are clear and whether it aligns more with what we think we need in the region.
So I think, firstly, appreciate everybody's feedback on that. My personal concern here is, are we missing out on something? And I don't know what I don't know. So I'm not expert in this area. but given the need for technical skills and having that kind of FE capability is really important. So help me understand, is there a gap that we should be trying to plug here? And if these institutes aren't doing it, then is there some other way of doing that? Or is waiting still the right answer, or is there something else? You know, is there a different path or a different intervention we should be trying to drive as a panel here? Or is that something we want to take offline and come back to the panel with later as a third option, I guess?
This one of the short action is the volume of level 4 and 5 work already across the FE colleges in West Yorkshire is significantly higher than any IoT would deliver. And bear in mind that the models for IoTs would effectively, the model we were putting forward in wave 1 and the model we started to put forward in wave 2 was effectively building on that infrastructure in the FE colleges. So the FE colleges in the region will continue to do everything we can to grow level 4 and level 5 technical education. So we're not really missing out in that sense by waiting until wave 3. There is 1 or 2 in the country, kind of centralized IoT models with one big new building somewhere. But that's not the model that we've discussed regionally for West Yorkshire. And if it were to be the model that we wanted to put forward, there are a number of challenges with making that kind of decision. And I'm not sure West Yorkshire is a region where people would necessarily all travel to a central point.
Okay, no, I appreciate the feedback. My only reservation here is, given that this is such a marquee program for the government, are we potentially positioning ourselves in a difficult place? And I don't know the answer. Mark, I think you want to come in.
Thank you, Rashik, and I'm afraid I don't know the answer either. But I guess one of the words that sort of really stood out to me about the Institute of Technology in the paper is this employer-led institution. And I think we've talked quite a lot in previous panels about getting employer sort of buy-in and ownership for the delivery of skills so they can be directly connected. And I think that this could potentially offer a way to do that. So if this isn't the right way, great. I guess my question then would be, are there other ways that employers could get involved with sort of selecting that, especially maybe some of the more specialist SMEs that we can have in this region that will be part of our sort of future innovation framework and our, you know, strategic economic plan? Like, I think that employer-led bit is a key element as well.
If I could come in there, Rashik, Mark, that's fantastic. The only thing is, I think the model already exists. Most colleges would cry out for a governor as enthusiastic as your good self, and there's plenty of evenings we could take up taking your advice on the future developments of the colleges. But that's a genuine point. I'm trying to go for the humour, but it's a genuine point that governing bodies or colleges exist to absorb representatives from the employer sector, and we'd love to have that kind of input.
And actually, I think. So now I think, just to take you up on that, maybe what we should be asking for is, in the next meeting, why don't we look at what could we be doing to help plug some of these gaps that we've got, and you know, the more effective the FE system is for us, the better it's for all of us, right? So what could we do and should we do to complement and support that? Yeah, Colin, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that would be a great discussion to have. I think the best time to have that discussion would be in a follow-up to the publication of the white paper, because we're talking slightly blind in that we already kind of really know that the white paper will try and address a number of issues around level 4 and level 5 nationally, in terms of the structure and system of how to grow that work and how to indeed make it more responsive to the needs of employers. So I think that would be a great discussion to have once the white paper is published and we can kind of analyse it and have a discussion about how we respond to it as a region.
Okay. Do you, I don't know, Sonia or yourself, do you know what the timeline is on that white paper?
The government are still adamant that it will be published before Christmas. That window is getting smaller and smaller, but nevertheless.
So actually the next meeting, the panel meeting, could actually be a good time for having that discussion then?
If the government meet the deadline that they've set themselves.
Well, let's assume they do. Let's be optimistic and assume they do. We'll adjust accordingly, but if we can either do it at the next meeting or the meeting after, depending upon the time of the paper.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Okay. I think that's good. Sonia, anything else you want to talk about on that one?
No, that was everything. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so the next topic was Skills Commission. I was hoping Councillor Hinchcliffe would have joined to cover that, but I guess in her absence, Sonia, do you want to take that?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you. So the panel will remember that the Skills Commission final report was launched in September this year, and that report set out a blueprint for a post-16 skills system in a devolved context, and the report contained 9 recommendations which are listed in your cover paper. Without going into the detail of what the Skills Commission has achieved over the past 18 months, 2 years, because this panel will be very familiar with that, having inputted into the design of it. I just want to focus on some of what's happening next, if you like. So just to update the panel that there are ongoing and proactive discussions between officers at the Combined Authority and senior government officials, mostly with the Department for Education and the Education and Skills Funding Agency. There's also been discussions at the M9 chief executives and with mayors across the country as an opportunity to present the Skills Commission blueprint as a solution and to help government with thinking perhaps around their FE white paper, and as an opportunity for mayors to talk with a single voice on skills. And then finally, the Combined Authority Board have asked for officers to work up a proposal around one of the specific recommendations, which is the one around levying some skills funding from public infrastructure projects, and how that can be implemented in West Yorkshire. So, for example, through our emerging investment strategy. So that proposal is currently being looked at and being developed, and of course will be brought to this panel once that's being worked through as well as being taken back to the Combined Authority Board.
Yeah, I know. I just want to just say thank you to the team, because I know there's a lot of work gone into that paper, and Nav was on the board, and I know the panel members were there. But that paper has been very well received. I was on the launch event for that, and the conversation was very positive. So it certainly positioned the region in the right way, and it gives us a framework to work forward with. So yeah, any comments, feedback, suggestions? I'm keen to make sure that we maximise the value of the work we've done here as well. David, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a great blueprint for post-16, but just wanted to again offer sort of a school's perspective on what happens pre-16, and I would argue that one of the gaps that we've got and challenges is where does the development of soft skills, problem-solving skills, adaptability sit in the pre-16 curriculum? What weight do we give to it, and what legitimacy do we give to it? And I think if you look at the future economic success of the region, those kind of skills on the one hand are the skills that are essential for a changing workforce and for the region to grow, but also the young people who I often speak to who are recently left school or recently left college, I think they would identify those sort of areas as either a gap or something that wasn't given enough enough weight. And I think we could almost do some quite interesting work moving forward to capture that voice in parallel to listening to what employers need, and actually think about reverse engineering something that could sit within, because I'm not aware of that kind of work that's happening everywhere. It's anywhere. It's particularly with that legitimacy that your standard qualifications have, and I do think it's a missed opportunity, not only in terms of economic success, but in terms of well-being as well.
Now, great points. And the whole reason for the paper was to make sure we focus on some parts, but your points are very well made. And yeah, Sonia, Catherine, I think we need to think about how we come back and look at that pre-16 and what the skills that David described are absolutely critical for any lifelong learner and anybody who's going to have success in the world going forward. Peter,
so we can take that forward, and obviously the programme of work that we do with our schools on the Gatsby benchmarks can cover some of that as well. So yes, I'll mention it to Danielle as well. I'm sure she'll be really keen to look at that.
So, Catherine, is that something we want to do specifically, or do we want to just you have that discussion with the team and then decide whether there's a particular initiative we want to have here?
So I'll pick it up with Danielle, and Dave represents the Head Teachers Forum, so I'm sure that they can take this forward through a discussion there and then bring out some recommendations or actions for the panel. Okay, that sounds good. Yeah. Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Rashid. I'm just looking at the recommendation, which I think is a great one, around public infrastructure, and in particular, those projects that are designed to level up areas should include that additional skills premium of up to 5%. Has there been any feedback from national government about that? They've published today a national infrastructure strategy. There's talk, obviously, about a national infrastructure bank, with its being headquartered in the north. I think this is a really important initiative. Just be interested to see if there's been any feedback from government that it's putting more money into infrastructure about this particular proposition.
Sonia, have you seen anything there?
Yeah, I probably just say that there's two things. I probably can't say more than that there are ongoing conversations with government about the recommendations from the Skills Commission, but certainly the Combined Authority is committed to seeing what it can do to implement them. And that's where the proposal from the Combined Authority Board has come from, to look at how we can use our own infrastructure investments to meet that recommendation.
Yeah, it's safe to say we haven't just left it on the sidelines. I know COVID's got in the way of some of the negotiations, but we've been very active. I know Councillor Hinchcliffe has been really championing that in many quarters. So we want to maximise the value from that for obvious reasons. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so the next topic on the agenda was good work. I think, James, you're on. Do you want to take us through that?
I actually think James may have been held up elsewhere. So
okay.
You might have me again, I'm afraid.
Okay. This is going to be the Sonia show today. Yes.
So yeah, I'm sure James will join us when he's available, as he's been leading this piece of work with the Inclusive Growth Panel, of course, and has sent you an excellent overview report of what the Good Work Standard is, sometimes also known as a Good Employment Charter or a pledge. So Good Work Standards are typically to encourage employers of all sizes and in all sectors to adopt inclusive and people-focused employment practices, so that everyone in the region has access to high quality, secure and well-paid employment, and so that no one is left behind. And the impetus for the Good Work Standard has really come from the Inclusive Growth Panel, the LEP Board and the Economic Recovery Board, as well as across the north actually as well, through the MP11, who also have a pledge to look at Good Work Standard. And they're really useful to promote the idea of an inclusive economic recovery, but also recognising the tension that there's a lot of pressure to focus on driving headline job creation protection, whether or not these are classed as good jobs and good work. Currently, everyone who is currently in work is not necessarily in good work, and we've seen that actually affects some groups and communities more than it does others. So, for example, BAME groups, people with disabilities, and particularly mothers, especially where they are lone parents, are often too far away from being engaged in good work. But we're keen to promote good work so that it's seen as something for everyone, that it's seen as being good for economic growth, but also diversity and inclusion in the workplace is not just socially important, but also a key driver for innovation and profitability. So to date, the Inclusive Growth Panel and the Business Innovation and Growth Panel have already considered the headline case for a good work standard in our region, and have requested options to be developed. So today's paper, rather than dwelling on the rationale for why we should have a good work standard, we're keen to look at the strengths and weaknesses of the different options that are presented in the paper. And those three options are to adopt an existing approach. So in this case, the model from Greater Manchester, which is shown at detail in Appendix 1 of your papers. It's considered to be delivering well, and is well resourced in Greater Manchester, and has a pragmatic approach to completing with local approaches. This option, if it were to be adopted, would enable us to hit the ground running, so to speak. The second option is to adapt and developing an existing approach so it better fits with the current West Yorkshire context. So, for example, should the principles of enabling quality, diversity and inclusion, which are cross-cutting in the Greater Manchester model, be made more explicit? Other things to consider are what extent does the Greater Manchester standard reflect the current economic circumstances that we have as a result of the pandemic? And is the commitment to the real living wage an issue in terms of, is it preventing employers to sign up and therefore suppressing employment? And then the third option to consider is, should we just create something from scratch, from a blank piece of paper, and develop our own unique approach in West Yorkshire? The disadvantage of that is the time and the investment, obviously, of resource that would take. To give you an example, I think it took Greater Manchester around 18 months to develop their standard. So that's an overview for the panel to consider those three options.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, this is a really important topic, right? Having good work or responsible employers, whatever you want to call it, it's a topic which, again, we can set ourselves apart from other regions if we do this in the right way, and trying to pick the right path forward here, which is not onerous on the employer, but also seen as valuable from an employee perspective and a regional perspective is going to be key here. So what's people's views on the three options that Sonia laid out, the paper itself in general? Yeah, let's go ahead.
Right, just unmuted myself. Thanks, Sonia. From my perspective, I would strongly advocate taking a model that already exists. Firstly, from the time perspective of putting it together, but also as a national employer, you can imagine we get approaches from a lot of combined authorities with their different models, which are actually in principle very similar. but with different kind of focuses and wording, and just from an HR perspective, it makes it much more complicated and much more difficult for us to sign them. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd like one national good work model, but I know that that's some way away. But my strong preference would be to adopt something that's already working. I mean, there are no principles in the Greater Manchester model that I think would be inappropriate for Leeds.
Yeah. Thanks, Liz. Sonia, any comments on what Liz just said?
No, other than thank you, and perhaps that's something to explore with the MP11 partnership as well.
Yeah.
Rashik, just from my point of view, along similar lines to Liz, you know, I don't see the point necessarily, but obviously we look at it as an employer from a different point of view of reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
And maybe there's something that's, you know, a couple of tweaks around it, so we make it our own, but certainly starting with a blank sheet of paper seems, you know, in today's circumstances, everything else going on, just making work for everybody.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments?
Rashik, yesterday at the Business Innovation Growth Panel, we talked about a productivity study in effect, and I think this paper makes a really important point about the relationship between good work and productivity, particularly at firm level, which is what this study is set out to do. I think important to kind of try and make sure that there's a synergy between the two initiatives.
Ian, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Peter. That's a really important point, and part of the reason for wanting to develop this standard, apart from being the clear statement of what we mean by good work in this region, like others says, that is not too dissimilar from what any other region would say, but it's also to support things like the productivity pilot and other business support, where we have made inclusive growth and sustainable growth part of the criteria. So rather than doing that bespoke for every single business support scheme, which I think we will do more of in the future, it's proved to be quite successful. Having this standard helps us, is an easy way of then attaching it to each of those schemes and making it to some extent a condition of getting that wider business support. You know, if you want our support, you need to be offering good work, would be the basic principle.
Okay, I think it's a clear message of good guidance there. Sonia, anything else you want to add?
I don't think there's anything else to add. I've just posted a question in the chat about what possible risks there might be in terms of implementing such a standard and how we might mitigate against those.
Could I ask a question, but particularly of Liz and Amanda, based on their intervention so far? Have you got any experience of how you deal with differing standards internally, or in practice, have they been so close you've just kind of signed up for whatever you've been put in front of you kind of relatively easily?
Liz, you're on mute, Liz.
Right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Right, sorry about that. Fourth time today. I think from our perspective, it just clogs everything up in terms of the time it takes for different HR teams to kind of look through, you know, what the differences are and are we being equitable, and it just slows everything down kind of significantly, I think, if you've got a different standard to go through, because, you know, we're very kind of wary, as I'm sure every employer would be, of not signing something unless we're confident that we can, you know, uphold all the standards all the time. I mean, there's a huge reputational risk of getting involved with something like this if you can't maintain it. And to go to your question, Sonia, about what are the risks to mitigate against, I mean, I would speak to Greater Manchester and I'd speak to Newcastle and I would find out what the take-up is on their, you know, particular pledges. But I guess it's a balance, isn't it, of making it sort of strict enough that it means something, but without being so specific that it becomes, you know, that it inhibits people from signing it. So I would just take the experience of those that have done it and find out what the barriers were, if any. They'll have good intel on it.
And I think to add to that, Liz, it's around two things from my point of view. We'll sign up to things that fit with the kind of principles that we work to as a business anyway. And we have business in Europe too, which obviously has a whole different set of things they're working to. But I think from an employer point of view, it's about just being really, really clear. And I'm not sure I'm totally clear yet what difference it makes. So, with all due respect, does signing something like that, I mean, it obviously helps a business's reputation if they're associated with the good, positive things, but it's got to have some value to the business as well as value to future employees, etc. And I know I say this every panel, Rashik, so I'm sorry, but there's so many things we can get involved in. Yeah. We have, and I'm sure Liz has as well. We've signed up to Kickstarter because that's the new thing. There's just such a lot out there, and it's just trying to be sensitive to that balance around, we all want the right outcome. We all want to try and help people from an employment and skills point of view, but we'll approach it in different ways. But it's cutting through the layers of complexity that's my constant message. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Ola, I think you wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, just to say that I think this is interesting, and I think we're being asked to sign up to lots of sort of specific charters around diversity and stuff. I like the fact that this is quite holistic about the sort of life cycle of our employees and being a good employer. I would be in favour, as some of the other panel have said, about if there's a good model that we can work with, let's not reinvent for the sake of it. But I can see how this would be helpful, and particularly if we can get mobilised, and involved in some of the education stuff that's going on in the region, that you then are also attracting good employers. You know what I mean? That there's a sort of a virtuous circle through the work that the panel are doing.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Rashik, and some great comments from employers. And I think let's also just recognise that the great employers that do participate in these conversations have super high standards anyway, and a willingness to involve. And I think let me just sort of bang the drum a little for the SMEs, because wouldn't it be wonderful if this programme was so simple and so clearly we had a great take up from the SMEs, which could potentially offer them a point of differentiation in recruitment, in what can be quite a competitive recruitment market when you're an SME. So I think that would be a key thing I'd love to see incorporated into the program design.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Mark. Okay, any other comments, questions? That's been a very valuable conversation. So I think that all comments really, really well made. Thank you. I think that comes to the end of the meeting. I don't think there's anything else on the agenda. I don't know, Sonia, Catherine, do you want to add anything?
Nothing from me, Rashik.
No. Well, let me wish everybody a continued safe and healthy time. Please stay away from the virus. Do we have a date for the next meeting?
23rd of February, I think.
23rd of February. It's just after Valentine's. So have a nice Christmas and Valentine's, and we'll talk then.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Christmas, thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Rashid.